ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today, I would like to talk about the Pokemans. Pokemon Go has been a big thing lately. It's kind of sweeping over. It's a big fad. I don't know if it's going to continue to maintain momentum, or if it's going to die down or not, but I've played a little bit of it. It actually doesn't work on my phone, so I had a lady friend that I was playing the game with for a little while. We wandered around the neighborhood and caught Pidgeys and Oddishes, you know, the lamest Pokemon, or the most common Pokemon in Generation 1. It was kind of fun. It was sort of neat in a couple of ways, and this is why I say I don't know if it's going to continue to maintain momentum or if it's going to fall out, because while it's kind of an interesting concept, and there are a lot of things going for it, there are also some things that are going to make it kind of suck. The things that are going to make it kind of suck, basically, is that any kind of competitive thing that's going on with that game, like the gyms or whatever, like more and more I'm seeing, like, first the gyms were controlled by people with, like, level 1000 Pokemon. And I was like, oh man, that's a lot. Like, I wonder how long it takes to get to that. And now they're gradually, you know, being taken over by, like, level 2000 Pokemon, you know, we're getting up to, like, level 3000 Pokemon. They're just getting stronger and stronger. And because there's no cap, and you're really not battling the Pokemon in a sort of real-ish way like you would in the games, it looks like the levels are just going to keep going up, and eventually it'll be just absolutely ludicrous to imagine people, you know, taking the gyms. Like, I mean, I guess it'd be a matter of time, but just the sheer amount of dedication would just be like, yes, I have no free time, I am taking this gym over. So you know, that's a weird aspect of the game as far as, like, competitive, like, what's my end goal. Eventually it's going to be like a really unattainable end goal. Right now I think you can still compete with people, but at some point they're going to have to do something about it. That's really the only bad thing about it. I think aside from, like, there were a bunch of technical glitches, but that's technical stuff. As far as what's fun about it, though, like, doing that sort of thing, like in a bit of a dating situation is kind of fun, because what it encourages you to do is, like, various monuments, parks, things like that are all Pokestops, like where you can go pick up Pokeballs so you can go catch more Pokemon. So if you're out with, like, a lady and you want to go see, I don't know, the town, then you can kind of pull that thing open and it'll be like, oh, you know, here's the museum, like, you can go down to here and that's a Pokestop, and here's this monument, here's some fountains, and so it's kind of cool because it's sort of like a landmark thing with incentive to go there because you're also playing a game, and that was sort of neat. Just around the neighborhood, like, there was a memorial in my neighborhood. I had no idea it was there. It's been here for ages, and I was just like, oh, well, this is here. Of course, the GPS wasn't working. It was under a bunch of trees, and so we were just kind of standing around. We were like, I guess we can't collect these Pokeballs. Oh well. So yeah, there's also a few. Like I said, there's a couple of glitches, but that said, I think, like, with a friend or with a lady, Pokemon Go, kind of fun. You know, if you're in a place that you're not familiar with, Pokemon Go, again, kind of fun, because it's telling you to, like, go to landmarks and things like that, or public places. It's got this idea of where you should go. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of in the spirit of what Pokemon was about, minus the battles. And it's all Generation 1 Pokemon, which in my opinion are the best Pokemon, because that's the I was like 10 or 11 or 12, I don't know how old I was, but I was young when they first released Pokemon. I was the demographic they were trying to cater to. In fact, I was one of the kids that got to see the pilot episode. They did a sort of a marketing sweep before they released Pokemon, and they sent out, like, VHS tapes to a bunch of kids, because this was back in the era of VHS tapes, and I got to watch the first episode or two, I think just the first episode of Pokemon, and then I got to say, like, what did I think of Pokemon, and I think I remember commenting that Pikachu was lame, and that Ash needed a better Pokemon or something like that, or it was something like that. Like, Pikachu was this cute little Pokemon, and I was like, yeah, no, he needs to catch one of those, like, vicious birds. Like, that's because he gets attacked by birds in the first episode. I was like, no, Pikachu is dumb. The others are okay. Like, it's nice that Pikachu has electric powers, but he's all cutesy, and that's dumb. But yes. Anyway, though, like, I got really into the games and stuff when I was a little kid. Like, that was the thing, you know, it was huge. Everybody was playing it. I played the cards and all that. And I have a lot of nostalgia for Pokemon, and I've just totally fallen out of, like, I don't even know what's going on, really, with the new generations or anything like that. I would have had to buy a Game Boy Advanced, or not a Game Boy Advanced, whatever, a DS, whatever's big, whatever the thing is now, and I wouldn't have time to play it either, is the thing, because I've been asked, they're like, would you ever want, like, the Pokemon game? And I like the competitive Pokemon stuff. My friends and I once, we did this thing where we had a Pokemon tournament, and this was essentially, we all got a bunch of beer, and, ordered, like, pizza, and whatever, and we were like, okay, you get to play Pokemon, the first generation Pokemon game, for 24 hours, and then at the end of that, you'll show up at this party, and we'll have a Pokemon battle. And it was like me and one other friend we were the only people who managed to hit that 24-hour mark, and everybody else was kind of like, I got a couple hours in. So, I like, we put money on it. There was like $20 of betting. It wasn't a lot of betting. It was like we put money down and then bought pizza with it. And then after that, the rest of the money just went into a pot, and it was like whoever won. And so I went home with like $20 from that. So that was fun. We did it again later, but this time we didn't put money down because it wound up being so one-sided. And it was kind of the same deal, except for this time it was Alan who was in second place. Previously, Alan did his best, but then his game got erased because those cartridges are getting old and the batteries start to fail, the save batteries. So, yeah. But old first generation 1 Pokemon, like, I'm kind of pleased that that's what we get to see, because I don't have as much love for the later generation Pokemon because I don't know them. I don't know who they are. Rayquaza and all that stuff. What are these newfangled Pokemon? What do they do? Like, dark types? That's insane. But Generation 1, though, there was a lot of flaws when that game first came out, and it was kind of funny because I believe that the game was first, and then they followed up promotion with the cartoon or something like that, and there are some design changes between the game and the cartoon, and occasionally the cartoon didn't quite line up with the game. I remember one of my favorite things, this really agitated me as a child, but looking back, this is kind of one of my favorite things, is that there was an entire episode where Ash Ketchum was trying to figure out how to defeat the Psychic Gym in the Kanto region. This was the original Pokemon. And so they were like, well, what's strong against Psychic Pokemon? And they go, oh, Ghost Pokemon are strong against Psychic Pokemon. And I remember thinking it was really weird that they had a Ghost type in Pokemon, because there was only one Pokemon, essentially, that was a Ghost type. And that was the Gengar line. It goes Ghastly, Haunter, Gengar. And, of course, most people I know only got to Haunter because you had to trade with a friend to get the Gengar. And even if you had friends to trade with, it was a great big pain in the ass because you had to be like, oh, hey, do you want to bring your Game Boy over? Let's sit down, let's trade, and then let's battle. And so, like, I was able to... I was actually one of those kids who got all 150 Pokemon. Like, I had friends that played Pokemon, and so we got the Game Link, and I traded back and forth, and we eventually wound up with all the Pokemon on our cartridges. But it was still a pain. It was a big pain in the ass, and it was kind of it was a sales scheme. They were trying to get you to be like, oh, well, you should buy 2 Game Boys and 2 cartridges, or at least your friends should. And, they're trying to create this sort of network utility where if your friends played the game, then you were more able to get more, Pokemon. And, because you could only get so many Pokemon on one cartridge and only so many Pokemon on the other cartridge, and you needed both cartridges to get all your Pokemon. But anyway, though, the Ghost thing was funny because the show made this really big deal about how, like, only ghosts could defeat psychic Pokemon. And I believe the game might have told you this too, like, it might have explicitly said this, but I don't recall where. I'm pretty sure the game manual also said this, like, there was a typing thing that showed, like, oh yes, no, ghost should be strong against psychic. Everything told you this, but then when you met your first ghost Pokemon and you caught the thing, there was a curious issue. You would notice that ghost Pokemon, or rather Haunter or Gengar or whatever, was also a poison-type Pokemon. And if you looked in the back of the book, it turned out that psychic Pokemon were super effective against poison Pokemon. So this created a little bit of a problem in that when you showed up with a ghost Pokemon to fight a psychic Pokemon, the psychic Pokemon were super powerful against your ghost Pokemon because it was also poisonous. So Ash, it really bugged me, and I remember thinking as a kid, like, I didn't quite make this logical leap. My thought was that Ash is always kind of stupid in the show. Like, he's always asking a lot of questions because he was the fish out of water for us. He's the audience surrogate. He goes around and he's, like, talking to people, and he's like, oh, how do I do this? Like, how do I do that? A Pokeball? Professor Oak, what's a Pokeball? And so like Ash was always he was always the dumbest person in the room. He was always wrong, so that people would correct him and that the audience would know that he was wrong. Like he'd be like, "Oh gosh, is that a whatever?" And then someone would be like, "No, Ash, Jesus Christ, it's a fish," or something like that, you know. And so Ash was always wrong. He was always the dumbest guy in the room. And so Ash got really excited about, like, I'm going to catch a Gengar, and I'm going to use it to fight the psychic Pokemon. And I kept expecting someone to pull Ash aside and be like, Ash, no, listen. it's half poison type. Your Gengar is going to get destroyed by psychic Pokemon. Don't go out and catch a ghost. Just go catch a normal type, and then just hit him with that. That's how it works. So, yeah, it was really weird, and it was really funny. And there was also a glitch in that psychic type attacks were not supposed to be able to hit ghost type attacks, I think is what it was, but they programmed it badly, and it was messed up to where ghost type attacks couldn't hit psychic type attacks. And I know it slipped by them because there was only like one ghost type attack that wasn't set to a formula, you know, it was like just straight damage, and that was the Lick attack, and the Lick attack was like a level, 10 thing, like Ghastly learned it off the bat, and it was terrible and did like 0 damage, so nobody would have ever used it later into the game. By the time you ran into a psychic Pokemon, you probably would have already moved well beyond it, and you'd be using like Nightshade and Hypnosis and Thunder and stuff like that. The nice thing about the ghost Pokemon was actually not that it was a ghost Pokemon, but more that it was it could learn a lot of different moves and was very fast and therefore very effective against a lot of different kind of things. Also, it learned status stuff, so you could paralyze other Pokemon or put them to sleep or whatever. So yes, terrible Pokemon against Psychic. I kept thinking that someone was going to tell Ash that he was wrong, but nobody did. The show insisted, and it just kept going on. And it turned out now that yes, Ghost Pokemon are effective against Psychic Pokemon. That was just a mistake of the early generation, but that was one of those weird things. There was also a lot of just weird glitches in the game, other things like that. Like every single attack had the ability to miss like once, and then you had this weird thing with stat boosting abilities. And so a lot of games, there was a thing you could do with Slowbro, where like Slowbro had a very high defense naturally, and it also learned the move Amnesia. And so your special stat was only one stat, and your special stat would account for your attack ability, your special attack ability, like your your psychic attacks and your water attacks, and it was also your special defense. So people would do this, they'd send out Slowbro, and they would just have him cast Amnesia over and over again. And he had high enough normal defense, and I think you could also get like Withdraw, which raised his defense even further if you wanted to be a total asshole. And he would just sit there, and you could just make him, like, you just gave him one attack, like be it Psychic or Surf. I think most people preferred Surf. And you would just have him like do Amnesia until his special stat went all the way up to maximum, and then like Withdraw if you were a total asshole and your friends didn't know how to counter this, until your defense stat went all the way up. Usually it was just the Amnesia thing. And every time he got a little bit hurt, you would just have him go to sleep, and that would cause him to recover health. And because his defense and special defense was so high, this made it to where, like, even if he was sleeping, the enemy couldn't kill him while he was asleep, so he would wake up and start killing all your opponent's Pokemon again, because all of his stats were raised up through the roof. This was a weird thing. There was no way to force your opponent to switch out Pokemon. There was no way to really like knock off any of those like beneficial status effects. It was just like, yeah, no, he's powered up. I win. Slowbro conquers the day. So Slowbro, one of the most powerful Pokemon in the game. In fact, he was one of the only Pokemon who could straight up defeat Mewtwo in a fight. If you played with friends who decided to bring Mewtwo. And of course, Mewtwo always broken. But I think one of the interesting things, though, is that over the years, like Generation 1, really, Psychic Pokemon dominated, and normal Pokemon were also very strong because they had no real weaknesses. Fighting Pokemon were not very good. For example, like Machamp was incredibly strong, and that made him a decent Pokemon, but unfortunately he was also super slow. And so he was kind of easy to mess with. Everybody got the first attack on him. So whatever Machamp was going to do, he was going to suffer for it, unfortunately for him. But yeah, as the game has evolved, though, like, you've seen this sort of online community build up around it, and now everybody goes on about, like, here's the tiers that you play with, and there's a meta, and there's all kinds of different things that people do. There's, like, evolution points, and back in Generation 1, the or the effort values is what it was. Effort values. Effort values used to be a hidden stat, and this was kind of neat. This was a thing I didn't know about as a kid. Everybody knows about it now. But one thing that they did in Pokemon, and this is rather clever, and I like this, is they added this thing that tracked how frequently you were using your Pokemon. So every time you defeated a Pokemon, you got a few points. And it was based on like the type of Pokemon that you defeated. You know, if like you defeated a Pokemon with a lot of health, then the game would store points and health for you. And when you leveled up, the game would throw a couple of extra health points on there because you defeated a lot of Pokemon that had more health. And you could take like proteins and carbos, and there were items that would actually boost this score. And the game did tell you about those, but it didn't tell you about how battling, or didn't directly explain the mechanics of how battling would do that for you. And in later generations, the way it worked is they actually just explained it point blank. And they go, yeah, okay, effort values. And I believe that they let you track the effort values so that you knew exactly what was going into your Pokemon. And you know, so you would give them all the vitamins or whatever, you get them up to 255 effort values. But in Generation 1, it was hidden. So you didn't actually know how many effort values your Pokemon had, and it was just based on how frequently you used them. So Pokemon that had, like, they warned you in the game. They were like, oh yeah, Pokemon that just levels up through rare candies may not be as strong as Pokemon that actually leveled up through battling. And when I was a kid, I always assumed that they were just lying. You know, they were like, oh, because you don't have the emotional attachment or whatever, you don't have the heart of the cards. But it turns out that actually, no, there was this secret value that they were tracking, and Pokemon that had leveled up the fair way, rather than by spamming rare candies, were actually objectively stronger. And in fact, there was this thing where even if you took like your proteins and all that, you had to put your Pokemon in the Pokebox, I think, and then pull them out again before their stats changed. So yeah, like just kind of a hidden value thing, and now it's become just a part of the mechanics. There's a bunch of things now that people are just aware of in the meta that we used to not know when Generation 1 came out. And a big part of that was because the internet was fractured into 1,000 tiny little pieces, and it was impossible to find any real information on Pokemon. Like, the thing was a huge craze, and that meant that there were thousands and thousands of insane lies about Pokemon that came out back then. Like, you would just go online and you would look up, like, best way to level up Pikachu, and then you'd find, like, 1 billion rumors about, like, ways to turn Pikachu into what they called Pika Blue. And Pika Blue actually was the thing that came about because there was some promotional material showing Generation 2 Pokemon, and one of them was a Marill, I think. Marill. And I believe that Marill, like, nobody really knows Marill anymore. Nobody cares about Marill. Like, Marill was another sort of cute little mouse Pokemon. It was supposed to be like, oh, it's another kind of like Pikachu sort of thing. But everybody saw that, and they assumed that that was part of Pikachu's evolutionary line, and maybe it was going to be like an Eevee, and Eevee being a Pokemon that, you know, if you put a rock in its face, and you bonked it in the head with the rock, then it would transform into like a water Pokemon or fire Pokemon or, you know, grass, depending on what kind of rock you threw at it. And so people assume, like, oh, you know, there must be some kind of way to transform Pikachu into this Pika-Blue thing. And so there were all kinds of rumors all over the internet, and not really very many central hubs explaining how things actually work. I remember going to a site that I thought was really cool, where there was just some artist who was like drawing their own sprites. They were making up their own Pokemon, and then writing their own descriptions. They were doing their own Pokedex entries. And I thought this was really neat. And I got really excited because I also, being young and naive, I thought that these were Pokemon that were going to be coming up in the next game. And so there were a lot of really interesting Pokemon concepts. I don't remember very many of them right now, but they were like cool, like legendary sounding Pokemon. And in my opinion, they were actually much better than the legendary Pokemon that we got. Like, later on, we got into, you know, the legendary dogs and the legendary robot-looking things. And, you know, like, I created space-time and antimatter. But this person was doing things like you know, this Pokemon lives in the center of the Earth, and, you know, it beats the walls of the Earth and causes earthquakes, and da-da-da. And so it was like an Earth-type Pokemon, and it had, like, these movesets and things like that. And so this person, it just, you know, like, it all looked very convincing, and it all looked really cool. Like, the descriptions were really neat. But Generation 2 kind of went on, and it was a little less, I mean, it was kind of more of the same, but it was also, some of the Pokemon were less inspired than I kind of hoped for. Nothing, there were a few things that came out that were as cool as Charizard. I don't know. I just have a special place in my heart for Generation 1. Generation 2, I think, came out when I was a teenager. And by that point, I'd kind of moved on to other things. It took so long for them to get the next set of games out that I was more interested in, I don't know, whatever was going on at the time. I don't remember what had captivated my interest, but it wasn't Pokemon. I did play the second generation game, or rather my sister bought a cartridge, and I played through. And among the few Pokemon I remember was Tyranitar. And so actually there's this thing online, this Pokemon tournament thing that's online. It's probably illegal and maybe going to be shut down sometime in the near future, which is really sad and unfortunate. But I remember everybody was like, play this, Pokemon Showdown I think it was. They'd be like, oh, you should play this, Greg, you should play this with us, battle Pokemon with us. And I made a point of only using Generation 1 Pokemon, because we don't need the other Pokemon. And then of course Tyranitar, because Tyranitar I remember was cool. And he may be later than Generation 1, but he was cool, so I'll tolerate him. And then everyone else showed up with all these crazy newfangled Pokemon. And I had to actually sit down and look up, like, all the new moves that had been added, because when I just used the old Generation 1 moves, I got my ass kicked. I was like, alright, Slowbro with Amnesia and this and that. And it was like, man, I got annihilated. Turns out, though, that now they have, like, much better moves. Like, Slowbro can actually just heal itself now. And Slowbro is still, like, it was really refreshing to see that the Generation 1 Pokemon that I used to use all the time are still essentially in the upper tiers, if you know what you're doing with them. Like, I believe Slowbro is still considered to be a top-tier Pokemon. Starmie might be still. Chansey still is. Chansey has some kind of like bizarre evolution, but I refuse to use it because that's past Gen 1. We don't need other Pokemon. There's no need. I feel this is just absolutely yeah. But anyway though, Pokemon Go. It's kind of interesting and I really sort of like it. I'm one of those people who feels like the battle mechanics need to be changed. Like, I would love for it to be kind of like a Pokemon game, or just something where there was something going on where it wasn't just like level spamming, you know? Like, I'm seeing people now catching level 100 Pokemon, and me and my lady friend were going out and we were like running into like you know, level 1, like level 10, like you get your first Pokemon and it's like, here, he's little, he's baby level, he's tiny, and it's like, oh, based on what I've seen on the internet, this Pokemon is going to be obsolete almost immediately. Because I think that you level them up, like you have to get candies, and you get them by catching a specific Pokemon of that type. And, you know, in the original Pokemon games, they would be like, here's your starter, it's a Charmander. You know, you can't ever find another Charmander. Like, if you want a Bulbasaur, you have to convince one of your friends to trade you a Bulbasaur, start a new game and trade you a Bulbasaur, or whatever. You couldn't just get a new one. And so they continue to be fairly rare, I believe, in Pokemon Go. And so it's like a big deal. If you see like another Charmander in Pokemon Go, that's a big deal. And the way it works is that, like I say, I think I'm not really clear on this, but you need to level up your Charmander, you need to capture other Charmanders. And what's funny is that as you level up as a trainer, you run into Pokemon that are also leveled up. So eventually, just from leveling up, like, you won't run into a lot of Charmanders, but you will run into a lot of, like, other Pokemon. And you'll level up as a trainer, and eventually you'll just run into a Charmander, and it'll be a significantly higher level than your starter because, you know, it's rare and you don't run into them very often. So you just catch that Charmander and it replaces your starter. So there's not really, like, a bond to them. You know, people are naming their Pokemons and stuff like that, I see. But as far as I can tell, I'm not sure if they really have any permanence, unless you absolutely want the Pokemon to have permanence. So, yeah, on a meta, there's like no meta, but it's still fun, it's still interesting. Like I said, it gets people kind of out and about and seeing places, going to monuments, being in public places. It's created a couple of issues because some public places don't like people hanging around, like, trying to catch Pokemon. I remember I went to the gym, and in the lobby, like I work out at the community center, and so like I went to the gym and I walked in and like there were a ton of kids in the lobby and they all had their phones out and they were catching Pokemon in there, and I was just like, oh okay. So that's the thing. Some businesses don't like that. With the community center, I feel like that a community center is absolutely the type of place where that sort of thing should be happening. Get a bunch of kids in the community center. It's for the community. This is this is what it's for. That and to go swimming and stuff like that and work out. I don't know. So yeah, I don't know. But it's a fun idea. Like I said, it's kind of in the spirit of the whole thing. I kind of like the idea. I don't know what I would do to change it to make it better. Because also I don't know how big of a call there is for other people to be like, yeah, no, I want to battle these, but in kind of a more complicated way. I don't know how big that is. Like, I'm always one of those guys. Like, I'm a strategy game guy. Like, I get into the meta of stuff. I like learn how things tick, and like I'm one of those people who like will crack things open. Like, if I were to get into Pokemon and the game had like a meta and there was a gym, like there's a gym right across the street from me. Like, I would actually go down there and I would try to take that gym. Except for the fact is, the only way that I can get that gym is if I just grind. Like, it doesn't matter how well I understand the game or how brilliant my tactics or strategy are. I just have to grind until I'm like level 3000 or whatever. And that's the only way to get that gym. So, yeah, I'm not too into that. I'm not too into the just grind to win sort of thing. But, you know, then again, MMOs are super popular. So maybe I'm in the minority. I don't actually know. But anyway, though, I know it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to see all these old Generation 1 Pokemon come back. It's been like nearly 20 years or something like that, I think, since Pokemon first came out. Maybe not quite that long, but we're nearing 2 decades. It's almost 20 years if it hasn't been already. Yeah, getting old. Yeah. Well, I suppose that's it, though. Those are my thoughts for today. So thanks for joining me, everybody. I will catch you all next time.